It is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Friday in September. We are 2 days away from the Ravens' Week 1 game against the Buffalo Bills, a rematch of the AFC divisional round in which the Buffalo Bills sent the Ravens home. Baltimore has a chance at revenge Sunday night in Buffalo. We are going to preview this game, look at it from every angle, and hand out some superlatives ahead of this game. Jonas, you've been at practice all week observing the Ravens. What is the vibe like around the castle? We were in this situation a year ago when the Ravens were preparing to face the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that had just eliminated them from the playoffs a mere 7 months earlier. Now they're in the same situation, going up against a team that sent them packing in the playoffs last year. Are they thinking about it? Is it on top of mind? Do they want to move past it? What's the mood like?
I think it probably depends on who you ask. It's a player-to-player decision. You talk to some guys early in camp, and Broderick Washington took it pretty seriously. Took the defeat pretty painfully because it was the run defense that was gashed. Ronnie Stanley, I think, talked on Monday about how this is not just another game because of how last year ended. And then, you talk to Lamar, and he's just kind of steady as a heartbeat, not really making too much of a big deal about this. Mark Andrews trying to not let this be that big of a deal. Todd Monken saying he's not going to, feed the ball to Mark Andrews any more than he normally would because of how last year ended in Buffalo. So I think it just kind of depends on, how close you were to the situation, how much scar tissue you have from that last game in Buffalo. But it's going to be probably an uncomfortably long wait. John Harbaugh was talking to us today about how he doesn't really like these night games because you go a little bit stir crazy waiting for that, 8:20 kickoff or that 6:50 inactive list. I mean, it's a long day of football that you're not playing in, and you've already waited 7 months for your next game to come up, and there's so much hype, so much buzz, so many expectations around this team that all you can really do is just kind of kick your feet back and relax when all that you're going to be doing, at 8:20 kickoff is just kind of preparing for war against one of the best teams in the NFL.
Yeah, let's hope we don't get any lightning delays like we got in that kickoff game last night so that they don't have to wait around for anything. Hopefully we don't get that.
I did forget about this. Luke Jones and the Baltimore Media Corps reminded me of this, that we did have to wait 20 minutes for that opener last year because of lightning in the Kansas City area.
I forgot
it was
about
very ominously dark in Kansas City last year, and then the clouds just kind of opened up, and we had to wait for another 15, 20, 30 minutes, however long it was.
I totally forgot about that too.
Me too.
That was the introductory game, obviously, to the NFL. So that was a weird one that we wrote about. I look back on when I was preparing for this game, because that was such weird things happen in week 1. And especially for a team like the Ravens that doesn't play pretty much any of its starters during the preseason, there was so much oddness to the offense. Felt slightly disjointed. It felt like, Todd Monken came in with a certain idea of what he wanted to do, and they had stuff that worked and they went away from it. There was weirdness with the penalties. Remember how they kept flagging the Ravens for illegal formation because they were trying to make a point about where the tackles should be lined up in the season. And it was just all over the place. And obviously it ends with Isaiah Likely's foot being slightly out of bounds and prevents the Ravens from getting revenge over the Chiefs. But let's hope this is a little bit more cohesive of an effort for the Ravens. We did a podcast earlier this week, by the way, on our feeds, which you can listen to anywhere that you get your podcasts. Write us a 5-star review, and I'll read it out here on the show, where we previewed the entire season as a whole. So go listen to that if you want our record and playoff predictions. We also did so on thebanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. And I posted them on all our social channels, Jonas, and you got called out for being the only one of our 7 contributors who did not pick the Ravens to win the Super Bowl. However, 7 of 7 picked the Ravens to win in the AFC, which sounds absurd. It looks and sounds like we're homers, but you also, I mean, if you ask the average NFL fan right now on the street who's going to win the Super Bowl, if they're tuned in whatsoever, they'll probably say the Ravens first before they name perhaps the Eagles and Packers and Bills and Chiefs. So yes, it doesn't look great that we all pick the same teams and we all pick the team that we cover, but come on, they're the favorites in the AFC for a reason.
Yeah, no one fills that. Well, I was about to say no one fills out a March Madness bracket and puts all of the 1 seeds to the Final Four, because your least favorite coworker probably does that, and you probably resent them for landing in the money every single time. But
yeah, and didn't
I don't know why I should take any crap. What's up?
All 4 teams in the Final Four, I'm pretty sure, were 1 seeds this year, by the way.
I think you're right. Duke, Houston, Florida, and then whoever the last one was. But yeah, I don't know why I should be taking any crap for picking them to do something that they haven't done since the Super Bowl, which is get to the AFC Championship game and actually win it. So a mutual friend of Jana Han and I pointed out in a message to her that I am literally the redheaded stepchild of Baltimore media, which credit where credit is due. That is pretty accurate, pretty spot on.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into this game Sunday night at 8:20. Right now, I believe the line is Ravens favored by 1.5. A lot of movement on that line, however. Over under is 51.5, which is the highest in the league, and it's 10 points higher than Steelers versus Jets, which, boy, that should be a slop fest, assuming what we know about those teams. All right, let's talk about injuries coming into this game. Ravens injury report has been, as you would expect for a week 1 game, has been pretty sparse. Only 4 names listed on there, and it looks like 2 of them will be full goes for Sunday night's game. And that's why our Who's Got It Better Than award, Jonas, this week goes out to Jaire Alexander, who had not practiced in almost a month. Gianna Han pointed out it had been August 9th, the last time we saw Jaire Alexander out on the fields behind the castle, dealing with he had a knee procedure and he was slow to come back from that. But it seems like he is good to go, and that's what he told you guys today.
Yeah, said he doesn't have a doubt that he'll play. So it's good news. We don't know how much he's going to play. We don't know where he's going to play, but the fact that he didn't get that he didn't get an injury designation on the injury report today is a good sign. Full participant Thursday, full participant today. So, he's, I guess, CB3 at this point. We'll see if they split any time with him and Chidobe Awuzie when they're out there. Maybe we see some TJ Tampa. It's going to be interesting to see just how this all kind of unfolds as we'll get into later on in the show. But no problem for him. No problem for Daniel Faalele, who was limited Wednesday by an illness, but seen fine playing Super Smash Brothers in the locker room today. So no injury designation for either of those guys. And it's a pretty slim pickings for injury concerns.
Yeah, obviously the big one is Isaiah Likely, who played a huge role in that game 7 months ago when Zay Flowers was out. The other Zay stepped up in a huge way, scored a touchdown late in that game, was a massive contributor, will not be playing in this game, downgraded to out. It's what we expected. He had surgery on his foot just a few weeks ago. That's a massive loss in the passing game. But look, the Ravens have Mark Andrews there. You feel good about their ability to give Lamar Jackson plenty of opportunities and plenty of targets. On the Bills side, the Bills will be out.
And also Pat Ricard, Paul.
Yes. Oh, and can't forget Patrick Ricard, who Pancake Pat will be out for this game. An injury that kind of sneaked up on everybody. It was a while before John Harbaugh got asked about what that injury was, but suddenly the Ravens will be without their do-it-all fullback, tight end, running back, whatever the heck you want to call him. That is another target taken away from this passing game.
Yeah, I don't think they were going to plan in on doing a whole lot of checkdowns to Project Pat, but
taken away from the offense, whatever. Swiss Army knife.
He's a sixth offensive lineman. This is a game. Yeah. This would have been a game between two teams that effectively use 6 offensive line sets. Obviously, the Bills do it with their actual 6 offensive linemen. The Ravens do it when they line up Pat as an inline tight end and just ask him to block the biggest, baddest dudes on play action dropbacks. So it's going to be a bit of a different calculus for Todd Monken without Project Pat kind of running stuff there, because he was obviously so critical in that Week 4 game.
How about the fact that the Bills will be without their starting kicker as well, placed on injured reserve today with a left hip/groin injury. So both these teams will have new kickers for this Week 1 game, because the Ravens obviously going with rookie Tyler Loop. Justin Tucker was their kicker 7 months ago, and Tyler Bass being out maybe changes the calculus for how the Bills approach some fourth downs, maybe changes their aggressiveness.
Yeah, and don't know how much experience Matt Prater, who's the 41-year-old who'll be stepping in, we think, for Tyler Bass, how much experience he has with dynamic kickoffs. He was only signed to the practice squad just a couple days ago, only played in 4 games last year for Arizona. So I think this is probably going to be a game with a lot of fourth down attempts, because of the kind of grinded out nature of both offenses and just how strong the Bills are up front with their offensive line and how much confidence the Ravens have in their own offensive line to get those tough yards. But you're right. I mean, if you're at the 30-yard line and it's 4th and 2 and you don't feel great about Matt Prater trying a 47-yarder, then just put the ball in the hands of Josh Allen and see what he can do.
Wasn't Matt Prater the kicker on those Tim Tebow Denver Broncos teams years ago?
Possibly.
I think he was. So. Basically, his long leg created the myth of Tim Tebow in a lot of ways, because I think he hit like some walk-off field goals in Denver.
Yeah, he was there from 2007 to 2014, and he was an All-Pro in 2013, which I guess would have been I forget when Tim Tebow's heyday was, but that sounds close enough to it.
Yeah, that 2013 season also kicked off with the Broncos beating the Ravens, I believe, in Denver by a wide margin.
And not in Baltimore, despite the Ravens having won the Super Bowl the previous year.
Yeah, famously. All right. Other than Tyler Bass, looking through the Bills injury report, what sticks out to you, Jonas?
It's pretty slim pickings. Obviously, I think the damage had already been done earlier this offseason. Michael Hoyt, nice kind of spark plug defensive end, serving a 6-game suspension for violating the NFL's PED policy. Same goes for Larry Ogunjobi, who's obviously very familiar to AFC North fans. He's also going to be serving a 6-game ban. It doesn't look like old pal of the Ravens, Trey White, is going to be playing this one. He didn't practice at all this week. The Bills listed him as doubtful with a groin injury. But they did get good news, because 2 of the guys who they, I think, absolutely need for this game, Christian Benford, Keon Coleman, both those guys showed up on the injury report as limited with groin injuries, but they were upgraded as the week went on, and they did not get an injury designation for this game. So both of them, like Jaire Alexander, like Daniel Faalele, are good to go. They got the green light.
Gotcha. All right. Let's do our word of the day here, which is a pick of mine, which is salvo. I heard it on the Athletic Football Show. I love the phrase opening salvo. The meaning is the first part of a speech or the first in a series of actions intended to get a particular result. Also, basically, salvo is like a military term of an aggressive move. So opening salvo is the first of that. It's a kind of attack, one that is strong or sudden. Comes from the Latin salve, which means hail, which is an ancient Roman greeting. This is the opening salvo of the Ravens season, and we'll see how it goes. And we'll see if there's what is different from the last time these two teams met, which ended in a 27-25 Bills win back on January 19th. Both of these teams, obviously, as every team does, have changed over the course of the 7 months that have gone on since then. In that game, Zay Flowers was not playing. Remember, he was hurt, missed both of the Ravens playoff games. Patrick McCary was starting for the Ravens at one of the guard spots. Malik Harrison started at inside linebacker, or Darius Washington started at safety. Justin Tucker was the kicker. Nelson Aguilar was the wide receiver too because of Flowers' injury. Brandon Stevens was one of the starting cornerbacks. No offensive snaps for Keaton Mitchell. This was a different Ravens team, and it's not changed over completely, obviously, but there were a lot of different pieces in there. And of all the names that I've mentioned here, you can't look at too many of them. Maybe the Malik Harrison changeover and say that's a massive change. That's a massive miss. That's a massive step down for the Ravens. It's pretty much the same team, and it's perhaps an even stronger, even better team than the one that faced the Bills back in January.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely would have loved to have Patrick McCary back on this team for whatever for a reasonable price, but he did not fetch a reasonable price on the free agent market, so they let him go to Jacksonville. But you're right. I mean, again, this team massively outgained the Bills in that game, despite not having Zay Flowers, despite having like 50 rushing yards at halftime. They just couldn't get it done in the red zone. They had the turnovers. It's not like that game was tipped to be a week 4 level blowout based on how the Bills were moving the ball themselves. But the Ravens were, apart from those catastrophic mistakes, apart from the times where they just stepped on the rake like Sideshow Bob, they were the better team. And now they have a better team than the better team that they had in the playoffs. So is it going to guarantee anything? No, but as you guys will probably guess, both Paul and I are picking the Ravens to win this one.
Hey, don't give it away there, Jonas. Nice Simpsons reference there. As for the Bills, Amari Cooper was playing for the Bills at that point. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago that he's just suddenly retired on the Raiders?
I think a day or two ago. Apparently, he just was not impressing anyone in Vegas there, and so you made this smart decision to do some arbitrage and get someone on your fantasy team.
Yeah,
Baltimore's own Dante Thornton.
yeah, picked him up very quickly in fantasy. Von Miller was the guy who picked up Lamar Jackson's fumble in that game. He's now on the Commanders. They didn't have Josh Palmer, who they added as a potential deep threat. Didn't have Joey Bosa, who they added, who's injury prone, but still has some upside there as a replacement for Von Miller. And our old friend Tre'Davious White, who's probably not going to play, but they brought him back as well. So it's a slightly different Bills team as well. But you mentioned it, Jonas. This was the game that sort of broke the Ravens in a way that forced them to hone in so much on causing turnovers, wreaking havoc on the defensive side. And hopefully the pendulum hasn't swung too far in that direction. It's certainly has been a storyline throughout training camp. It's what every player has echoed, what every coach has said from Zach Orr on down is we want to create turnovers. We want to punch the ball out. We want to get in the way of throwing lanes. Fine, but you also can't sacrifice being fundamental. And turnover luck is a thing. Turnovers are wonky. It just depends on who's in the right spot, the right time. Fumbles are weird. So I don't want the Ravens to focus in too much on that. But you look back at that game, if the Ravens don't commit 2 turnovers and force 0, they probably would have won.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that the Ravens, with this emphasis on the granular details and everything they've done with the practice grading and, of course, the just system-wide, unit-wide emphasis on creating takeaways, but it almost does sound like they want to be the Bills, because Buffalo, I think for like 3 years now, has been top 5 or top 10 in total takeaways on defense, which, as you said, is pretty unrealistic as a goal for a team to have that kind of consistency, because there's just dumb luck with fumbles, or you might face a slate of quarterbacks that aren't particularly good but take care of the ball. And the Bills last year relied so heavily on turnovers to keep themselves in games that when they couldn't get turnovers, they were like a bottom 5, bottom 10 defense. And they, of course, were not that great on a down-to-down basis against the Ravens in that playoff game. They were even worse in week 4 when they came to Baltimore. But they were able to get away with it, and they were able to get to the AFC Championship game because they took advantage of dumb mistakes. And Are they going to be able to on Sunday? I think they'll probably get at least one because you just kind of have that kind of Highmark Stadium magic. This is their final time playing in that stadium. It's going to be an unbelievably packed, loud, wild atmosphere. As you said, defenses are probably ahead of offenses right now in terms of just where they are in the flow of the season. But if the Ravens can, I don't know, what do you think is more important for the Ravens, that they take care of the ball or that they take the ball away from Josh Allen?
I mean, the way that Bills offense was built too by the end of last season, they were so depleted in terms of weapons on the outside. We'll talk about Keon Coleman in a little bit, but they just did not. Josh Allen had very few options in the passing game. It was obviously a very cold day. It was like 20 degrees around kickoff. And that team just leaned so much into the running game. They leaned so much into the legs of Josh Allen and James Cook that they became ultra conservative in that way. And so that's part of the reason. That's a huge reason why the Ravens were not able to force any turnovers, is because the Josh Allen that played in that playoff game was not the Josh Allen that played early in his NFL career or even earlier in that season when he was like throwing the ball all over the field. But, you'd get into trouble with some of the passes that you throw. So I don't know. I'm wondering if this Bills offense is going to change dramatically because of the addition of Josh Palmer, or if they're just going to say, we're going to keep running the ball. It worked for us 7 months ago. We're going to do it again. To me, I think it's more important that the Ravens force turnovers, because that's something that seems, I don't know, more controllable, I guess. Who knows?
Yeah, I think Ravens fans are a little bit overly fixated on this idea that the defense hasn't done enough in the playoffs because it hasn't forced turnovers, which is a big part. You want to give these guys a short field, but for the most part, when the Ravens have lost in the playoffs, the defense has done like at least a B plus job at just doing everything but force turnovers. It's just been the offense, or it's been special teams, or it's been coaching cock ups that have really cost them. So, even last year, they were one of the best defenses in the NFL over the second half of that season, despite not being especially prolific at taking the ball away. So I think it's probably unlikely that Josh Allen is going to be doing anything as boneheaded as he did in week 4, when he's just trying to make something out of nothing and gets the ball strip sacked away from Kyle Van Noy, who's just flying in on a broken play. We know that Josh Allen does a great job at just avoiding sacks and avoiding like turnover worthy plays. But if the Ravens start as quickly as they did in Buffalo when they took the ball and went down the field and scored on their first drive, and maybe if they get a double-digit lead in this game, then you do get Josh Allen reverting a little bit back into that loose cannon mode, and that would be to the Ravens' benefit, because that means that they probably don't have to worry too much about stopping the Bills on the ground, and that plays into their hands, because even though we both think very highly of their run defense, it's a little bit more easy. It's a little bit easier to create chaos in your favor when a team is forced into throwing the ball 2 of every 3 times or 3 of every 4 times.
All right, let's hand out some superlatives ahead of this game. Jonas, why don't you start it off with your first superlative question?
Yeah, I'm opening this up. The rest of them, I think we have our superlatives set, but
yeah,
the quarterback under the most pressure to win in a game that is the game of week 1, one of the games of the year, we think, Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, the reigning MVP.
I think it's no question Lamar Jackson, because Josh Allen is the reigning MVP, whether he deserved it or not, and because of the result of the game 7 months ago. It's going to be, this is something that's going to hang over both these quarterbacks' heads until they do it, which is get to the Super Bowl. And unless you're Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow, you haven't done it in the AFC in a while. So one of these two guys needs to get over that hump come January. But in the meantime, I think the pressure is slightly more on Lamar Jackson in this game.
I would agree. I would say that this is Josh Allen's first game since getting married. So you don't want to have the stink of your marriage to a beautiful celebrity being attributed as the reason for why.
And she just dropped I mean, she talk about her Super Bowl, Sinners. What a film that was. Haley Steinfeld is his new wife. I mean, nothing he does short of winning a Super Bowl, nothing he does this season is going to compete with that masterpiece.
And you just know that like Bill's Mafia has a couple photoshops, right in the chamber right now that is like the Sinners font, but it's winners, and it's
True.
you just can't play that card if you lose the game. It's also a hugely important home game for the Bills. I think their schedule is so easy compared to the Ravens, which I think if they were closer and this was like an actual potential inflection point in what is an inflection point, but if this was if the schedules were closer in terms of actual seriousness of opponent and the kind of breaks that it looks like each team will get, then I think you could argue that Buffalo would be under more pressure to win this because they would have far fewer chances to make up ground. And, with this being the ultimate tiebreaker, the head-to-head tiebreaker, you would say that the Bills would have to hold serve at home so that they could potentially, come out on top at the end of the season. But that's not how it broke. The Ravens have a much harder schedule, at least that's how it looks. And really the pressure is on them to go into a stadium where the Bills didn't lose once last year. They went 8-0 in the regular season. They went 2-0 in the playoffs, and then they lost to Kansas City in that AFC Championship game. So that's not going to be the ultimate deciding factor. But if we're talking about, refs being susceptible to emotion and whatever home field advantages accrue to the home team based on the fact that they're playing there, maybe that is enough to swing a potentially 50-50 game in their favor.
All right, my superlative that I'm handing out here, Jonas, is for the most intriguing Ravens debut. I'm most intrigued by DeAndre Hopkins. You could put Malachi Starks in there. You could put Mike Green in there, sure. But to me, I'm going to be watching DeAndre Hopkins because he was the X who has been promised. He was the guy that is supposed to, for years, fans were looking at as somebody that could change the dynamic of this offense. They finally get him, but do they get him too late in his career? Because of the way that things finished last year with Kansas City, it wasn't spectacular, especially in the playoffs. And especially when the Chiefs faced the Bills in the AFC Championship game, just 2 targets for DeAndre Hopkins, 1 catch for 11 yards. Can he put up better numbers in that game? How much will Lamar target him? And if he doesn't hit on some of those sideline shots, some of those 50-50 balls early, does Lamar abandon that and go with the more sure-handed, more surefire ways of picking up yards with Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman? Or does he keep trying them throughout the game and hope to hit 1 or 2 of them?
Yeah, and that actually dovetails perfectly with my superlative, which is I have 2 most important injuries. But for the Bills, it's a guy that has not been in the mix for this game in a while. Maxwell Hairston, their first-round pick, speedy little guy, but he landed on injured reserve with a knee sprain. His absence is important because, as we already talked about, it doesn't sound like Trey White is going to be a go with the groin injury. So if you're the Bills, you have 2 very reliable, very impressive cornerbacks in Christian Benford, who is a Maryland native, and Teron Johnson, who didn't have like the usual all-pro type season that he usually does. Last year, he's their nickelback. He's an amazing run defender, which allows them to play in nickel against heavier sets, usually not against the Ravens. Although I do think that he missed that week 4 game, which was very important. But the Bills now are wondering who's going to start outside cornerback opposite Benford. Is it going to be Jamarcus Ingram, who is a 4th-year guy with 1 career start over those first 3 seasons? Or is it going to be a rookie? Is it going to be Dorian Strong, who's a 6th-round pick, also from Maryland, Upper Marlboro in PG County? And you put all that together with the uncertainty at safety, there doesn't really sound like it's going to be a plus unit for them. And you're talking about, the opportunity for Todd Monken to, if you don't feel great about lining up in 21 personnel or in 12 personnel or 13 personnel, then maybe it's fine because play the hand you're dealt. And what the hand that they are being dealt right now is a Bills secondary that is very weak and should have some liabilities there if Lamar gets the time that he needs to wait for those routes to develop and pick guys out downfield. It's going to be interesting. And DeAndre Hopkins is obviously going to be a very, very important part of that. They need him to be a guy that Lamar can go to on 3rd and 5 on those curl routes or slants or whatever it's going to be if other guys are getting well covered. Something I'm touching on in the preview for tomorrow is the Bills didn't have like an elite secondary last year, but they still bothered Lamar last year in the playoff game with man blitzes. The interception that he threw was against the man blitz. He was sacked against the man blitz. He was pressured on basically half of the time that Buffalo sent, 5 or more guys after him and played man coverage behind it. So do the Ravens, with all their great separators and enough good protection that they had last year, can they find a way to take Lamar from the kind of mediocre to above average form that he had against those man blitzes and make it a potent weapon where if you are blitzing this team and are playing man coverage behind it, then you are liable to watch, Zay Flowers or Rashad Bateman take a 5-yard slant into a 70-yard catch and run score.
Yeah. And in terms of the most important injury for the Ravens, I mean, I personally would give it out to Isaiah Likely. Why do you have Patrick Ricard as winning this superlative?
Just because I think he's going to be really important as a pass blocker, like we've talked about with the play action. Greg Rousseau's a great pass rusher. Bosa, if he's healthy and still has the juice, a guy that I think you would want to, help out with some chip blocks if he's lined up against Roger Rosengarten or if Ronnie Stanley's struggling. You want that flexibility. And then just, you look at what they did in week 4 last year when he was on the field. They averaged over 8.7 yards per carry on 23 attempts. Granted, that was influenced greatly by the big Derrick Henry run to start that game. And they were still pretty effective with him off the field as they have been, or as they were for both games last year. But it just, he is a guy who is very hard to prepare for, very hard to simulate in practice. And maybe they bring up, Lucas Scott, their rookie from Army, who is, training to be potentially the Pat Ricard replacement at fullback there. But there's just no there's just no one-to-one replacement for a guy as big and strong and as kind of intertwined with Derrick Henry's success as Pat Ricard.
Yeah. How about most surprising advantage? What do you think this is for the Ravens here, Jonas?
We talked about it a little earlier. It's special teams. As bad as the Ravens were last year, finishing 23rd in DVOA, according to FTN, the Bills were worse. They were 28th in the NFL. They fired their special teams coordinator, and now, of course, they're signing a 41-year-old kicker to do the job of Tyler Bass, who, again, was not great last year. So is he going to have the leg to handle a 50-yarder? Is he going to have the expertise to maybe give the Bills some kind of advantage in that dynamic kickoff? I guess we'll see. He did go, credit to him, 6 for 6 last year in 4 games for Arizona. He was 28 for 33, more than respectable in 2023, also for the Cardinals. But it feels like the Ravens have, a pretty clear advantage there, assuming that we like what Tyler Luke can bring, and assuming that, LeJontay West or Keaton Mitchell, Rasheed Ali, even if those guys don't have breakout performances, if they just hold, if they just take care of the ball, if they give Jordan Stout a couple opportunities to drop punts inside the 10-yard line. I think he had a great preseason. Chris Horton was raving about him on Thursday. So I think it's important that the Ravens show that, like, the 2025 Ravens special teams is not the 2024 special teams, because if it's not, and they've bounced back to the level of prior John Harbaugh masterclasses special teams, then they'll give themselves some cover for those days where the offense isn't as great or the defense as great as we expect it to be.
Yeah. Biggest wild card. This one you decided to hand to Keon Coleman, who is the second-year wide receiver for the Bills, somebody who I loved in the pre-draft process and did not fall to the Ravens. 6'3", 215 pounds. He's a big dude. He is a prototypical X target, and he gets a lot of 50-50 balls thrown his way. The question is, how many is he ultimately going to come down with? Had just 1 catch for 5 yards in that playoff win by the Bills last January. And in the first meeting between these two teams last year, had 3 catches on 4 targets for 51 yards, mostly going up against Brandon Stevens. It's a situation like not dissimilar to the one that DeAndre Hopkins is in, where it's, all right, how many 50-50 balls is he going to get, and how many is he going to come down with? Because they're massive swing plays over the course of a game. And if Keon Coleman is ready for his second-year breakout and Josh Allen is ready to toss it up to him, those could be game-breaking plays. And it's a question of who's going to be on him as well. If that's Jaire Alexander, if that's Chidobe Awuzie. Jaire Alexander has had his struggles with bigger, stronger wide receivers in the past. Note A.J. Brown in last year's season opening game when he was playing for the Packers. So maybe this is a matchup that the Bills look to exploit.
Yeah, I think his role is really going to depend primarily on what the Bills' run game can do. Like if they can get something going and they can force Kyle Hamilton to drop into the box, Malachi Starks to drop into the box as that other run stopper to help with their run integrity, then that means that they're probably playing single high and Josh Allen, if he wants Keon Coleman to run a go route, we'll tell him to go run a go route. And then it'll just be, can Josh Allen put the ball in a place where only Keon Coleman can get it? And Keon Coleman, by virtue of that 6'3" frame, soft hands, 38-inch vertical jump, will probably have the advantage against most of the Ravens cornerbacks that he goes up against. Marlon Humphrey is strong, but he's not as big as Keon Coleman. Nate Wiggins is probably going to be outgained by, 25 to 30 pounds in that matchup if they get in close quarters combat. Jaire Alexander is only 5'11". Cheeto's a little bit taller, but doesn't really have the kind of physicality that he used to when he was a star for the Bengals. So I think it just could be a situation where we're talking about Keon Coleman trending on Twitter either for the right reasons or the wrong reasons if you're a Bills fan, because it's really tough to know, like, does he going to have the ability to separate? And if not, is he going to have the ball skills to still make plays when Josh Allen thinks that he's the right guy for the job?
Who do you have as the biggest wild card on the Ravens side?
To me, it's Trenton Simpson. I'm so fascinated by what the plan is with him, because I think there was some indication early on that the Ravens wouldn't necessarily need him to be on the field as often as like the Patrick Queen, Roquan Smith partnership was, where you could get away with playing dime personnel, where you have Cheeto or you have TJ Tampa or you have a third safety like Sanusi Kane, basically helping you get by with 6 DBs and just one off-ball linebacker. But this is a Buffalo team, like the Ravens usually are, that likes to play smash mouth football. They ran almost 150 plays last season with 6 offensive linemen on the field. They like to take their chances with screen passes, which obviously is going to send those big uglies out into the open field. And you would much rather take your chances with a linebacker than with a safety being able to defeat a block like that. So I'm going to be really interested to see in what situations the Ravens use Trenton Simpson. Is it going to be scaled back from what it was at the start of last year? Do they take him off the field even in situations where it's 11 personnel? And do they match 11 personnel with nickel, which would mean that he's on the field, or they go to dime, which means that he's probably coming off? It's going to be fascinating. You would trust him to be able to kind of run with someone like James Cook in space, maybe more than you would Roquan Smith. But I just think that with all of the, eye candy and all the motion and all of the trickery that Buffalo has, that is where mentally it can get really challenging for a guy like that who's still having to prove that this game has slowed down for him. So I think we'll know kind of how the Ravens feel about Trenton Simpson based on what we see in the first quarter, second quarter, first half overall.
All right, Jonas, it's prediction time. Who do you have winning? You already told us or earlier, but what do you have as the final score for this game?
Yeah, I got the Ravens 27-20. Again, it wouldn't shock me if the Bills come out of this one with a win, maybe even a relatively comfortable win, like 7 to 10 points. We saw last night just how crazy first weeks could be, especially, it didn't even matter that Dallas was playing in Philadelphia. They were able to kind of hang with them in the injury, or the Jalen Carter injury, obviously the suspension, the ejection played a big deal in that. But I just think that the Ravens are well built for this. I think they can take advantage of the Bills defense where it's compromised. And I think my kind of low key MVP for this game is Tavius Robinson. I went back and watched some of the film from that loss to the Bills in the playoffs, and he had a couple of nice run stops where he's reading the read option and getting to Josh Allen, or he's crashing from the backside and dragging down the ball carrier at the line of scrimmage. But there were also a couple plays where the Bills just ran right at him, and he was the guy you could say who was at fault for like an 11-yard gain, a 15-yard gain. And that's the kind of easy yardage that the Ravens can't afford to give up. And, we know how highly the Ravens think of Tavius Robinson by the fact that he didn't play a single snap in the preseason, that they love where he's developed as a pass rusher. But I think the fact that he could be a guy who could give you just rock solid run defense and also potentially be that pocket collapser with that strength that he has. He might not be as gifted technically. He might not be as much of a pass rush threat as Kyle Van Noy, but I just think in a game like this where Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown are so strong out wide, and you're going to have to take on really nasty pulling blocks from, the Bills guards and center. You want a guy who is built like a Greek god, and Tavius Robinson is so thickly built. And so I look to him as potentially being a guy who, kind of like Malik Harrison was in that game against the Chargers, that like an under the radar hero. I think Tavius could be the guy that Baltimore is kind of raising a toast to if the Ravens come away from this game with a win.
Yeah, find someone who talks about you the way that Chuck Smith talks about Tavius Robinson.
Glass eater.
Glass eater. Absolutely loves him, and somebody that we're going to be watching closely as this defense and the front seven for the Ravens evolves over the course of the season. My score prediction for this one, Jonas, is mostly influenced by the fact that I saw the comments on our very similar predictions for the season, and I saw all of the way that our predictions were shaping out for the game on thebanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, and everybody was picking the Ravens to score 27 points. It was like, I don't know what it was. Everybody was picking the Ravens to score exactly 27, and most were picking the Ravens to win. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to pick the Ravens to score 30. 30-17 is my final score for this game. And I look back to week 1 last year when the Ravens were totally disjointed on offense. They were trying to incorporate Derrick Henry in for the first time, their new free agent addition. The offensive line was being penalized every which way. They had 3 new starters along the offensive line, and they still managed to score 20 points and would have been 26 or 27 if Isaiah Likely had kept his foot in bounds. This offense is going to score a lot of points. They are bringing back almost all of the same pieces that they had last year. I think this offense is going to be raring to go, and I think that they are going to be scoring early and often in this game. This is an offense also that last year, that game was so weird for so many reasons why the Ravens lost that game. They had to have had way more explosive plays in that game against the Bills than the Bills did. Obviously, Josh Allen had half as many passing yards as Lamar Jackson did. So it's going to be interesting. And I look back at as well at the difference between the week 4 game last year and the playoff game between the Ravens and the Bills. The week 4 game, it's easy to forget that Justice Hill absolutely ate in that game. He caught 6 passes for 70-something yards in that game, and he wasn't nearly as used, nearly as effective. I think he only caught 2 passes for 7 yards in the playoff game. Justice Hill is another weapon in this offense that we sometimes forget about because we're talking about Derrick Henry and we're talking about Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews and the return of Keaton Mitchell. Let's not forget Justice Hill as another weapon, as just a reminder of how many options this offense has. So I've got the Ravens winning by 13.
Put you on the spot here. Josh Allen was sacked all of 14 times last season. The most that he was sacked in a single game, again, before the playoffs, was the Ravens in that week 4 game where he got sacked 3 times. I think one was Kyle Van Noy, one was Travis Jones, and maybe Adafe had the last one. I can't remember. Maybe it was a corner blitz. What do you think? How many sacks will the Ravens finish against Josh Allen in this one? Again, he averaged less than 1 sack a game behind that offensive line.
I'd say 2 or 3. I don't know. I don't know how to predict that, but I am also intrigued to see if this offense, like I said, if this offense totally changes its stripes because of Josh Palmer. Because also Josh Palmer should add a lot. I mean, he was somebody that was highly coveted in the free agent market because he's 25 and a solid, steady receiver who had over 500 yards the last several years. But it's not like he was the cream of the crop. I mean, it's not like he was the best of a very, very weak wide receiver class. So yes, he in theory fits exactly what they wanted to add, but it's not like they added a number 1. So I'm curious. It's going to be an interesting week 1 game.
One of the low key, only in the NFL matchups that we could get is Daniel Faalele at 6'7", 360, wherever he is, going against Deion Walker, who's 6'7" and listed and went to the combine and measured in at, I think, 337. What did he weigh? 331. So
Wow.
two just absolute colossi going at it. Obviously, we didn't talk a whole lot about that Bills front. It's undersized. Aside from Walker, they're going to try to shoot gaps. They're going to try to, do enough to kind of get the Ravens into obvious passing situations, and that's where they feel like that they have an advantage. But it's possible that the Ravens, with what they have done this offseason and another year under George Warhop, are able to just physically manhandle them up front. But watch out for potentially Faalele versus Walker, who had a really nice preseason, but also just because of him being 6'7", I think could get out leveraged pretty easily.
Faalele versus Walker reminds me of Mancano versus Cone of the Baltimore Sun, Sam Cone. It's
he's going to love listening to that.
That I shouted him out here.
Yes,
it's going to be a test to see if he listens all the way to the end of the episode, to see if he finds that little nugget in there. It's going to be an interesting matchup. I'm excited for it. Everybody can follow our coverage on thebanner.com. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. At Gianna_Jade and at Kyle Goon. Gianna Hahn, Kyle Goon, Jonas Shaffer will all be in Buffalo on Sunday night. And we will have a post-game podcast for you probably in the wee hours of Monday morning, where we will be going live to react to week 1 against the Buffalo Bills. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Jonas Shaffer,